Welcome to our deep dives today. We're looking at some pretty cool stuff about Waaree Renewables Technologies Ltd.
Yeah,
They're a big name in India's solar energy world.
huge.
So we're going to take a deep dive into how they performed in Q3 of fiscal year 2025.
All right, sounds good.
But first, did you know that India added a whopping 24.5 gigawatts of solar power in 2024?
Seriously?
Yeah, almost triple the amount they added in 2023.
Wow, that's impressive.
It really shows how fast India's energy scene is changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Waaree is right in the middle of it all.
Right at the heart of it.
For this deep dive, we've got their investor presentation, the earnings call transcript, a press release, and their financials.
Awesome.
So we're going to try to figure out a few things.
Yeah.
What's driving Waaree's success? How do they stack up against their competitors?
Yeah.
And what's their game plan in this ever-changing market?
It's a fast-paced market, that's for sure.
It really is.
So first off, their revenue growth is through the roof.
It is.
Like up a crazy 85.87% year over year for the first 9 months of the fiscal year,
Jeez.
bringing them to a total of INR 1,121.17 crores.
Okay, so that's revenue, but are they actually making money?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Okay, great.
Their profit after tax,
The bottom line.
exactly, is up 43.94% to INR 135.16 crores.
Those are some really strong numbers.
They are.
It really makes you wonder, how are they pulling this off in such a competitive market?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is.
I think one of the key things is that they're really focused on what we call EPC.
EPC.
Yeah, engineering, procurement, and construction.
So like they're the ones actually building these solar projects.
From the ground up, yeah,
Okay, so it's not just about the solar panels, they're handling the whole thing.
the whole shebang, yep.
Got it.
And they're not just focused on one type of project either.
Okay, good.
We're talking massive solar farms,
Right.
but also rooftop setups for homes and businesses.
Okay, interesting. So they've got a good mix going.
And get this, they're even trying out floating solar projects.
Floating solar, like on a lake or something.
Exactly, like on lakes and reservoirs.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super innovative.
I do wonder, though, is floating solar as efficient as the stuff we see on land?
That's a really good question.
Are there, like, technical challenges with that kind of setup?
Definitely. I mean, floating solar is pretty new.
It is, yeah.
And while it's got some advantages, especially where land is scarce,
Yeah, that makes sense.
there are hurdles they've got to overcome.
Okay.
Think about it. The waves, potential water damage, they need specialized anchoring systems.
Right.
Waaree would have to really think outside the box to handle those challenges.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, they're tackling different parts of the solar market.
That's good.
But how do they stack up against the competition?
Yeah, is it just a race to the bottom with pricing?
Well, they've got a huge order book, like 3.4 gigawatt of projects ready to roll.
Okay, so they're keeping busy.
Yeah, and they just snagged a massive deal.
What deal?
A 2 gigawatt project for Jindal Renewables. The biggest solar EPC order in India ever.
Really? So it's not just about being the cheapest.
Not at all.
They're proving they can handle the big complex projects.
Exactly, and that's where their reputation comes in.
Right, they've got to have a good track record.
To land a contract that size, Jindal Renewables must really trust them.
Makes sense.
It shows that Waaree can deliver.
They've earned that trust.
Absolutely.
But let's be real. Everyone wants a piece of this booming market.
Yeah, it's hot right now.
So how is Waaree making sure that they're not just growing, but growing and actually making a profit?
Great question. And this is where their strategy gets interesting.
Okay.
They're really committed to maintaining a 15% profit margin.
15%? That's pretty impressive.
Especially with all this competition.
Yeah, they're not messing around.
So they're choosing their projects carefully, making sure they're financially worthwhile,
Smart.
instead of just chasing every opportunity that comes their way.
Yeah, quality over quantity.
And they've also said they prefer working with private companies. The ones that invest in these large solar farms.
What do we call them again?
IPPs, independent power producers.
IPPs, right?
So basically private companies that own and operate these power plants.
Got it.
This focus on IPPs tells me that Waaree's building a strong rep in the private sector,
Okay,
where reliability and quality are super important.
that makes sense.
Okay, so we've got a company with crazy growth, diverse projects, and a sharp focus on profits.
They're ticking all the boxes.
Yeah, but are they content with just the solar market, or are they thinking bigger?
That's what I want to know.
Well, it looks like they've got their eyes on something new,
What's that?
the data center market.
Data centers. That's unexpected.
It is.
What's the connection there?
Well, data centers use a ton of energy,
They do?
and there's a big push to make them more sustainable.
Okay.
Waaree sees an opportunity to be a leader in that shift.
So they're not just riding the solar wave, they're
Mhm.
thinking about the future of energy demand.
Exactly.
That's smart.
And they're not just jumping on a trend, they're strategically positioning themselves to be a front runner in this changing energy landscape.
Data centers are a whole other ballgame, though.
Oh yeah, way more complex.
So are they really prepared for that? Like the technical stuff and the competition?
That's a fantastic question, and one we're going to dig into in part 2.
Okay, great.
We'll also look closely at their financials, see if their actions actually back up their ambitious talk.
Love it.
So stick around, we've got a lot more to unpack.
This is going to be good.
Welcome back to our deep dive on Waaree.
So before we get to the data centers, let's look at their financials. How are they actually doing right now?
Their performance for the first 9 months of fiscal year 25 is pretty remarkable.
Okay, lay it on me.
So they reported a revenue of INR 11,121.17 crores.
Yeah.
That's a huge jump from the INR 621.19 crores they had in the same period last year.
We're talking like an 85% increase.
Yeah, it's huge.
But is it sustainable? Or is this just a blip because the market is so hot right now?
Well, let's look at their EBITDA. That's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Right.
So their EBITDA climbed to INR 184.57 crores.
Okay.
That's a 39.95% increase compared to last year.
So their growth isn't just because they're selling more, their operations are efficient too.
Absolutely, they're managing costs well.
So they're growing revenue and they're keeping things profitable. But what about the bottom line?
The actual profit they're making.
Yeah.
Well, their profit after tax, or PAYA, is looking good too.
Okay.
It hit INR 135.16 crores.
And how does that compare to last year?
It's a 43.94% growth year over year.
Wow. So it looks like their growth is solid and probably sustainable.
That's what the numbers suggest.
It's great to see a renewable energy company doing so well.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So let's focus on the most recent quarter, Q3 of fiscal year 25. What did that look like?
So in Q3, they brought in INR 360.35 crores,
Okay.
up from INR 324.19 crores in the same quarter last year.
So it's still moving in the right direction.
Yeah, even on a quarter-by-quarter basis.
That's a good sign.
Did they maintain their profitability in Q3?
What do you think?
Well, their Q3 EBITDA was INR 71.92 crores,
Okay.
which is actually a little lower than the INR 87.81 crores they had last year in the same quarter.
So a little dip there?
Yeah, but remember, they are investing in some pretty big growth plans.
Right. They're playing the long game.
Exactly. It's not always about squeezing out every last rupee of profit right now.
Yeah, strategic investments are important for future growth.
Totally. And if you just look at their core EPC business,
Okay.
their customer revenue from EPC hit INR 1,093.99 crores.
Is that a big jump?
It's massive,
Yeah.
up from INR 580.80 crores last year.
That's more than double.
And they achieved that on a volume of a 1,024.92 millivol-pinare compared to 473.44 millivol-pinare before.
So they're not just winning contracts, they're getting things done.
Yeah, they're executing efficiently and at scale.
That's impressive.
Anything else stand out to you in the financials?
Well, I thought their announcement about the dividend was interesting.
Yeah, they're giving out an interim dividend of INR 1 per share.
That's a pretty significant payout.
It is 50% of their face value.
It shows they're confident about their financial position and that they want to reward their investors.
Exactly, a good sign for anyone thinking about buying their stock.
So what about their future? What kind of projects do they have in the pipeline?
At the end of Q3, they had a solid 3.4 gigawatt of projects in their order book.
And when are those projects supposed to be done?
They're estimating about 9 to 15 months to get them all done.
So that's a lot of potential revenue coming in soon.
Absolutely. Plus, they're bidding on even more projects right now.
How many more?
We're talking a whopping 23.37 gigawatts.
Seriously, if they win a big chunk of those,
their growth could be even more insane.
they're not slowing down at all.
They're hungry for growth, and they're
Yeah.
going after every opportunity they can.
But remember, they're also committed to staying profitable.
Exactly.
So how do they balance that aggressive growth with their focus on margins?
Well, in their earnings call, they said they are sticking to that 15% margin.
Which is pretty conservative considering how fast the market's growing.
That's true, but it also shows discipline.
Yeah, they're thinking long term.
Absolutely. And it's particularly interesting with all the competition in India's solar market right now.
So they're not just trying to be the biggest. They want to be the most profitable.
And the most sustainable.
Exactly.
So that affects how they bid on projects.
How so?
They're actually avoiding projects with low margins even if it means losing out on some potential revenue.
So they're being really selective.
Yeah, only going after projects that fit their financial goals.
That's where their relationships with those IPPs come in handy.
Exactly. Those strong relationships mean better margins and better contracts.
It's a smart strategy. They're using their reputation to get better deals.
Absolutely.
But have they actually walked away from any big projects because the margins weren't right?
Well, in the earnings call, they did mention that they decided not to participate in some very competitive tenders.
Even though they could have made a lot of money.
Yeah, it shows real discipline.
Wow, they're sticking to their principles.
And it also shows they're confident they can find the right projects, ones that fit their vision.
Okay, so financially they're sound, they're growing fast, and they're managing their growth responsibly.
But what about debt? Are they taking on a lot of risk to fuel all this expansion?
That's a great question. What do their financials say about that?
Well, they have a good chunk of cash on hand, something like INR 200 to 220 crores.
Okay.
And they actually have very little debt right now, just one outstanding loan for about INR 28 crores.
That's pretty impressive for a company that's growing so fast.
Right, it shows they're being careful with their finances.
And what did they say in the earnings call about taking on more debt?
They said they're not actively looking for more debt to fund their projects.
Really?
Instead, they're focusing on securing non-fund-based limits, mostly for bank guarantees that their clients require.
So they're basically minimizing their reliance on traditional loans.
Which makes sense given their strong cash position. And it helps that they have access to these big non-fund-based limits from banks.
How much are we talking about?
About INR 1,400 crores.
Wow. That's a lot of financial flexibility.
Yeah, and they're also diversifying their financing
How?
by using insurance products that offer similar benefits to traditional bank products.
So they're being pretty creative with their financing.
Definitely. Plus, they have the advantage of being part of the Waaree group,
Right, the parent company.
which gives them extra support and resources, especially for those big projects.
It's like having a safety net.
Exactly. They've got a strong foundation to build on.
So we've seen that Waaree is in a good financial position. They're growing fast, and they're doing it all responsibly.
But remember, we started by talking about their plans to move into the data center market?
Right, and we haven't even touched on green hydrogen yet.
Yeah, there's so much more to discuss.
So are there any clues in their financials about how they plan to fund this expansion into data centers?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore in part 3.
Okay, good, because I'm dying to know.
We'll also look at the potential risks and challenges they might face in this new market.
Right, because it's not going to be easy.
And of course, we'll dive into their plans for green hydrogen.
All right, can't wait for part 3. It's getting good. So we talked about Waaree's amazing growth, their solid financials, and how they're all about making a profit. But they're not stopping there, right?
No, they're just getting started.
They're looking at data centers and green hydrogen. Those are some ambitious plans.
It's a bold move going into data center EPC. It's a whole different world from solar farms.
What are the biggest differences? What kind of challenges are they going to face?
Well, data centers are super picky about power. Like, it can't go out ever.
Yeah, makes sense.
Any little interruption can be a disaster for all the data they're storing and processing.
So it's not just about having enough power. It's about making sure it's always there.
Exactly. Waaree's got to prove they can build systems that are that reliable.
Okay, but the data center world is already pretty crowded.
Oh,
right?
yeah, tons of competition.
And those guys already know what data centers need.
They've been doing it for years.
So why data centers? Why not focus on other industries that need green energy?
Well, data centers use a ton of energy.
They do.
And that demand is only going up as we rely more and more on data.
Right, everything's going digital.
Plus, there's this big push for data centers to be more eco-friendly.
Yeah, sustainability is huge right now.
And Waaree wants to be a leader in making that happen.
So they're tapping into a market that's part of the global shift toward green energy.
Absolutely. It's a smart move.
And they mentioned in their earnings call that their solar EPC experience is actually pretty relevant.
Oh, yeah.
The data centers and solar farms are big projects with complex engineering and a need for efficiency and reliability.
It's all about project management, procurement, and construction, just on a different scale.
So the skills transfer over.
For sure.
But what about green hydrogen? That's a whole other thing, right?
It is. Green hydrogen is produced using renewable energy.
It's clean.
Yeah. It's a clean alternative to the old ways of making hydrogen.
And it's got a lot of potential
Huge potential.
for all sorts of industries, transportation, even manufacturing.
Yeah, it could be a game changer, but it's still early days.
Like the Wild West of energy,
full of potential, but a lot of unknowns.
So is Waaree just jumping on the bandwagon?
Not at all. They're being cautious.
Yeah,
They're figuring out the technology, the market, the risks before going all in.
that's smart.
They're using what they know about solar and EPC to get ahead, but they're also being realistic about the challenges.
They're not getting ahead themselves.
And they're not doing it alone.
Oh, right. The Waaree Group.
Their parent company already knows a thing or two about hydrogen.
Makes sense to use that expertise.
Definitely.
But even with all that experience and planning, new markets always have risks. What are some of the hurdles Waaree might face?
Well, they need to figure out the specifics of data centers and green hydrogen.
Right, because it's not the same as solar.
Exactly. There are overlaps, but also a lot of new things to learn.
Like learning a new language? You might know the alphabet, but the grammar is totally different.
Yeah. Perfect analogy.
And they're going up against some big players in both markets.
They've got to prove they can compete.
Show they're the best choice.
Yeah, and build those relationships, earn that trust.
And then there's the whole regulatory landscape.
Oh yeah, the rules are still being written for green hydrogen.
And data center regulations are constantly changing.
It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Waaree has to stay flexible and adapt quickly.
Absolutely.
So there are definitely some big challenges ahead.
Yeah, for sure.
But they've shown they're willing to take risks and learn new things.
They're not afraid of a challenge.
Is there anything else we should keep in mind about their future?
Well, managing their growth is going to be huge.
Okay.
Expanding into new markets while keeping their current operations going smoothly.
That takes a lot of juggling.
They need to plan carefully, use their resources wisely, and find the right people.
Make sure they don't overextend themselves.
Right. And they can't forget about staying profitable.
Yeah, growth for the sake of growth can be a disaster.
Sustainable growth needs careful planning and execution.
So we've looked at Waaree's past, their current strategy, and their ambitious plans for the future. What's the main takeaway for our listener?
I think it's that Waaree's a company that embraces change and isn't afraid to go after new opportunities.
They're not just riding the wave, they're shaping the future of energy.
They're ambitious, strategic, and committed to sustainability.
And their story is a great example of how a company can adapt and succeed in a market that's changing all the time.
Absolutely. It's been fascinating to learn about them.
And to our listener, we encourage you to keep learning. Dig deeper into data centers, learn more about green hydrogen, and keep an eye on Waaree. The future of energy is full of exciting possibilities. Thanks for joining us.